This is The Linda Steele Show on demand. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and listen weekdays 3 to 6 on 980 CKNW and on the Radio Player Canada app.
Jody Vance with you. Welcome to the program. On this Thursday, we have a very busy, jam-packed, must-listen radio program lined up for you. And first up, your COVID-19 numbers for the day. First, the good news. 0 deaths in the last 24 hours. The numbers that might be a bit more stressful, the expected increase in case numbers, that is happening. 89 new cases in the last 24 hours across British Columbia. 89 is the number in the last 24. 53 people in hospital. That's up 5 from yesterday. 15 in the intensive care unit, down 1. There are 781 active cases across the province. That is up 130 over last week. Now, the rolling 7-day average, 63. That's up from 42 on Friday. And if you want to break down how many new cases in the last 24 hours, according to Health Region, I find this really interesting. Over and above the fact that there were no new deaths in the last 24 hours, that's really the most important number, I think. Fraser Health, 30 new cases with 219 active cases. Vancouver Coastal Health, 18 new cases, 263 are active. And in Interior Health, 37 new cases of COVID-19 in Interior Health, 244 active cases there. We are keeping our eye on the big story in our province, of course, the provincial state of emergency continuing in BC. Thanks to those ever-growing wildfires across the province, we will check in with Carly D at BC Wildfire Services at 3:45. We're doing that daily just to get the very latest. On the other side, in our next segment, we got a nice big long segment. We want to reflect some light on an announcement made this week by the BC government in support of First Nations in British Columbia in helping a financial piece of this puzzle, but also a pair of liaisons to help First Nations in British Columbia with the mission to find any and all missing children or missing former residential school students on all former residential school sites across our province. We're going to get into that with the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Murray Rankin's going to join us momentarily here. But first, I do want to bring in Eric Chapman, my partner here, because we're going to be taking some buzz lines through the show. And Eric, you came up with this idea, so I want you to sort of set it up and lay it out for our listener.
Well, it wasn't technically, I brought it to the table, but it's technically Reddit's idea because I saw this on the Vancouver Reddit and I go through periods where I am in deep, dark, depressive state because of this question, but other times I accept it. And the question is, does anyone else feel totally defeated by living here? And are we living in a nightmare every day? Things get more expensive and out of reach. 604-331-2899. Do you feel totally defeated by living here? And tag it with this. How do you get through? What keeps you here even though you feel that defeated? Or are you going to go away? 604-331-2899. 331-BUZZ.
331-BUZZ, 604-331-2899. That's our buzz line. Eric's going to be monitoring that throughout the show, talking about the affordability crisis that is living in Metro Vancouver, for that matter. It's not just the city of Vancouver, but it's expensive to live here. And Reddit was saying that people are feeling a bit defeated. So, Eric, thank you for that. We will send you to the buzz lines and, of course, reconnect later in the program. You got a couple of very cool conversations, one with Jesse Miller about getting grumpy on Twitter, getting gaslit on Twitter, how to handle your digital citizenship, and whether or not you support a dislike button on that social media site. Jody Vance with you. And this week, the BC government announced new liaisons and supports to assist Indigenous and First Nations with the investigation of former residential school sites in our province. To walk us through these initiatives, I'm very pleased to welcome the MLA for Oak Bay Gordon Head, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Murray Rankin is on the line. Thanks for doing this. Thank you, Jody. I tell you, I watched that press briefing live on Tuesday, right? It was Tuesday. My days are all melting together. That's right. And then we immediately reached out to Melanie Mark. We immediately reached out to you saying, oh my gosh, we have to talk about this. Everybody's been so busy because this is such an important, it's an understatement to say how important it is that this is finally capturing our collective Canadian awareness. And I just want to play this clip for our listeners so they understand the magnitude of what we heard from one of the liaisons, Charlene Bello. She was recounting some of her intergenerational residential school trauma. Honestly, just have a listen to this clip.
My own great-grandfather committed suicide at St. Joseph's Mission Residential School. They buried him there without telling our family. They strung our children on poles and lashed them until they passed out.
It is unbelievable how we did not have our ears open to this. Canadians' eyes certainly being opened now, wanting to be humble learners. Can you give us an idea of the meaningful, tangible action that the BC government has opted to take here, the first steps?
Well, thanks, Jody. And one of the first steps we've done is we've, of course, retained Charlene, who's Charlene Bello, who you just mentioned, was so deeply involved in all of this. She was the former chair of the First Nation Health Council, along with Lydia Whitsom, who was a former chief of the Cowichan Nation, and they're going to help us with liaison to the various communities. There are 21 of them. There are 18 residential school sites in our province and 3 hospitals, so-called Indian hospitals, where there may also be unmarked graves, and that could have been the site of other atrocities people have mused about. The point is, we've really got to get to the bottom of this. We've got to understand, if we're going to have truth and reconciliation, what the real truth is. And Jody, you put it well. I mean, a lot of people have had their eyes open about this. Elders have told us for years about the atrocities at residential schools that Charlene just recounted in that clip. But now it's time to figure out, taking our lead from the individual First Nations, how to best move forward.
And what does that look like for the BC government here? Because in watching the press briefing, I got the pieces of the puzzle, the dollar figures, the missions, the want to include the leaders within the First Nations and Indigenous community to really direct the government as to how to best help and how to apply for more monies in support. And credit where credit is due here. BC is stepping up in ways that other provinces perhaps are not. The federal government is making moves forward, but BC very much trying to fill in some gaps here. Am I right?
Yes, you are, and thank you. That's exactly how we see it. The federal government have, to their credit, they acknowledge that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, several of their calls to action involved that dealing with the issues of what happened at residential school, what happened to the missing children, and there was about $27 million that the federal government set aside back in 2019 in the budget, and that's for the whole country, Jody. So it'll be dissipated pretty quickly as the expensive work of doing ground penetrating radar work or whatever is undertaken. But the federal government is taking a role in this, and they should. It's a federal program, after all, residential schools that we are talking about. But British Columbia feels we can help, fill in the gaps, as you put it, putting money aside for planning, documenting what happened, maybe commemorating the sites, archival research, and so on. But equally important is we need to make sure that there are monies available to provide resources to survivor support networks, Indigenous service providers, to provide mental health supports, cultural supports to survivors and intergenerational survivors. Like this, it needs to be understood that the legacy of residential schools is with us to this very day. This isn't history. This is current events. And it's important that your listeners understand that people have been traumatized by this, and many of them have been re-traumatized. People I've talked to who have been clean and sober for years and years, and then all of a sudden the revelations at Kamloops School came forward, and they're now back on the bottle or doing drugs. I mean, it's been really, really profound for some people, and so we have to make sure that the overwhelmed survivor support lines and networks, that they have the funding that they need, and Indigenous people tell us what they need, and we are there to stand beside them and help. So that yes, the federal government is going to be providing help, but we're going to try to make sure that there are no gaps, and we're going to make sure that if they want to come forward, if a particular, we call them caretaker communities, those nations that are closest to the residential schools, the 18 and the 3 hospitals I mentioned, that they have monies available when they want to come forward, if they want to come forward. They don't have to all come forward at once. We want to make it very user-friendly. We're going to fast-track requests. We're not going to make this a bureaucratic process. And with the help of the 2 Indigenous liaisons I mentioned, Lydia Whitsom and Charlene Below, I think we're going to be able to help immediately when they come forward and ask for it.
Such an important piece of this puzzle is the fact that these atrocities were well known to First Nations. There's so much pent-up emotion here. Even having the few conversations as a humble learner that I've been having in recent weeks since the discovery of the unmarked burials in Kamloops, a good time to point out that those who find this conversation triggering, anyone experiencing the pain or distress as a result of your residential school experience, please know you can access a 24-hour toll-free, confidential National Indian Residential School crisis line at 1-826-925-4419, 1-866-925-4419. And we're so glad to be able to have you to speak this through, Minister Rankin. Really, to what you were just referencing there, how much we've failed our fellow citizens here with result of mental health issues and the addictions associated with the tamping down of the emotions and the memories, and really what was stolen from our First Nations and Indigenous peoples right up until recent years. Those who want to say, oh, this is history, this is ancient history. As you said, this is very much today.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's current events, and it's the generation that followed the people who experienced residential schools, which we would today call trauma. They experienced, and there's such a thing as intergenerational trauma. I hear about it all the time, and children and people in communities to which they returned are still affected by this to this day. And it's up to us, given that history, given the atrocities, given the abuse that these young children suffered, that we do our best to stand and beside them, and not in a kind of a paternalistic way, but standing as allies for them to identify how we can assist and assist when and how they ask us to. That's really what this funding is available, and it's really what reconciliation is about as well. When you get right down to it, this is a piece of a very, very big puzzle, a complicated one. It's colonialism, essentially.
Yes.
It's really about how we reverse a pattern of colonialism that goes back to 1846, when British sovereignty was established in our part of the world, and then in 1871. This week we're celebrating, or at least remembering, the 150th anniversary of BC's entry into Confederation. We need to really have a deeper understanding of the history, the good and the bad.
And even those of us who mean well, who want to help, who are non-Indigenous, who are non-First Nations peoples, it is very important. I feel personally, I'm learning as I go. I'm going to make mistakes, but in my efforts and my want to shine light and amplify the voices of those who must be heard, we'll all make mistakes in doing that. What's our best path to educate ourselves on what is your file, a very difficult file in being the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation at this historic moment in our country?
I really like how you put it about, learning, and yes, we're going to make mistakes. I think that's exactly right. And when I ask that question, or like questions like that to elders and Indigenous leaders, the first thing they tell me is listen.
Yeah.
Like, listen to understand, try to really understand, put yourself in our shoes and what we've gone through, and ask yourself, therefore, how you might be able to be partners with us as we go through our journey. I've always found that not many people have actually read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, the 94 calls to action. And it's a remarkable piece of work. It really is, and it's really well written, and it'll give Canadians a great understanding of what has been the consequence of residential schools. What happened, and now we're learning more about what happened alas, but also just, what specific tangible things can we deal with? And those calls to action involve governments, federal, provincial, municipal. I was at an event yesterday which was quite moving in Mission, where the province conveyed land to three of the nations, the Stalo nations of Matsqui, that was part of that, and Lakamel was another, and Sumas, and these nations came together and they acquired the land from the province, and they're going to lease it back, part of it at least, for a park in the city of Mission, a protected area, but also land for much-needed housing and ultimately more economic opportunities on property they will own. Like, what a great story. And it's a great example of how municipalities can be part of the reconciliation effort, and I commend City of Mission and many of the municipalities. There's a committee of the UBCM that is very much engaged in all of this work. And I got to tell you, I get the sense that Canadians are really wanting to step up and make non-Indigenous Canadians are trying to really figure out how to best assist. And I would suggest that reading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report would be a very good place to start.
Becoming a humble learner and on a mission to being a supportive ally is the lesson here. Murray Rankin, thank you so much for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Jody.
Jody Vance with you. And as promised, it is time to connect with our BC Wildfire Services. Carly D, Fire Information Officer, is with us live on the line. Hey, Carly.
Hi, Jody.
Hey, can you bring us the latest? What's the updated situation in our BC wildfire state of emergency?
Yeah, currently we have 268 active wildfires, bringing the total to date up to 1,176. We have seen some success in the Caribou in recent days. With the rain received, has helped to reduce fire behavior, and as a result, we saw a low fire behavior on the Hot Narco Creek fire yesterday. The rain on the Flat Lake fire also helped to reduce the intensity of the fire, giving crews a couple of days of low activity to kind of get ahead of things. There was also no growth on the Young Lake fire. However, we have had the wind as one of the major concerns the past couple of days. So it did cause some growth on the Big Stick Lake fire. It's now estimated at 7,321 hectares. And today we have ground crews and heavy equipment, as well as helicopters, working to establish containment lines around the area where that fire escaped the pre-established border.
Perimeter. Yeah.
We also have the South of Canham Lake fire does remain quite active, but it's within the containment lines. As we look at the Kamloops Fire Center region, we have had significant wildfire activity due to the wind that we've received on a number of incidents. The Lytton Creek fire, for example, they continue to see hot and dry conditions, resulting in increased fire activity in the afternoons and into the early evening. And that fire activity there does continue to be influenced by the winds. We are hoping that these winds, I'm expecting to see the winds die down a little bit this afternoon and into the weekend. We also had a significant growth on the White Rock Lake fire, and that was mostly on the northeast and the southeast flank were both active late in the day. So while we did see activity on a number of fires in the Kamloops Fire Center, we didn't see any growth on the Sparks Lake, the Three Valley Lake, or the Thomas Creek fire yesterday. And we have crews on those incidents today establishing containment lines and working with aerial support to address any areas where the fire did escape the pre-established perimeter. In the Southeast Fire Center, however, still continuing to see aggressive fire behavior driven by the winds, especially the Octopus Creek and the Trozo Creek wildfire, which are expecting considerable growth on that Octopus Creek fire, unfortunately, due to visibility concerns. Getting a more accurate estimate of the size has been a challenge. We do have crew on-site personnel working to establish control lines closer to communities in the area.
Where are we at with regard to evacuation alerts and orders today?
We did see an increase yesterday, the most notable in the southeast, where we had 7 additional evacuation orders and 7 additional evacuation alerts. In the southeast, in the central region, things have remained relatively stable, and we're sitting around 80 in the province at the moment. Something that has come up since we last chatted is, unfortunately, we have had some members of the public who have come across our off-shift firefighters or personnel support and just kind of made comments that they aren't working hard enough or should get back to the fire line. And just want to acknowledge we understand that things are incredibly distressing and difficult for members of the public. But of course, those people are out long days working really hard to try to keep everyone safe. And we do just want to remind everyone that they deserve our respect and gratitude from those folks.
No question. Absolutely, Carly. I'm so grateful that you said that aloud and here on CKNW to anybody in earshot who maybe had thought out of frustration it was okay to comment at somebody who is a wildfire frontline hero. Probably best to just keep that under the realm of gratitude rather than any other comments. Big gratitude to your team and everybody on the front lines. Carly, thanks for doing this.
Thanks again, as always, Jody.
Cheers. That is Carly. Jody Vance filling in today. Let's assemble this week's political panel. A pair of powerhouse women back with me here. We want to welcome Barinder Rasodi, founder of Haven Life Versus and ECO Grow Tech Labs, who also has the esteemed place in history of being the first South Asian woman elected to Surrey City Council. Always good to connect with you, Barinder. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me on, Jody.
And Diane Watts, our former Surrey mayor and former MP. Diane, good to have you aboard as well. I love having the two of you do our political panel. Thank you so much for taking some time.
Yes, thank you. Good to be here.
Let's dive right in here and start with something hyper-local. Let's get into the happenings surrounding the Cloverdale Rodeo Exhibition and Association. This is a municipal and provincially funded association that is in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons here. I wrote a column about it at theorca.ca if people want to dive in a little bit more. But the human rights complaint filed here is astonishing. The allegations of harassment, sexual harassment, racism, 21 whistleblowers here coming forward with stories that are bone-chilling. You can find all the accounts in the public document that is this filing, this complaint. The association apparently has no infrastructure whatsoever for reporting complaints, never mind investigating them. Diane, do you want to start us off here? What do you see?
Well, I mean, first of all, having 21 people come forward, and especially with the allegations that have been laid out, is really very, very disturbing. And when I look at, how the mechanism for reporting these things has been set up, I go back to the city of Surrey, frankly. And the Cloverdale Rodeo is run under contract of those grounds by the city. They're contracted by the city. There's city councillor, I think this go round, Doug Elford, was on the board, and what I understand is that the mayor and council were notified in January that this was going on. So there are some really disturbing allegations here that are totally inappropriate and that really need to be addressed in several different ways. One of the things when I was mayor, and Barinder will recall this, is setting up the policy around the respectful workplace policy, whistleblower policy. And those were implemented for precisely those reasons. So there are mechanisms for reporting. And even though they're a contract with the city, they can still approach the city and have these issues addressed because there are city staff on site.
Right. Barinder?
Oh, I think one of the things that's really unfortunate, the Cloverdale Rodeo is iconic not only for the city of Surrey, but also for the province in terms of the type of event it is. And, this is a testament to, I think, what's happened in Surrey in the last few years, which is it's really gone backward on a number of progressive issues. The fact that this complaint was not addressed right away, the fact that a sitting councillor would not have been aware of the culture and climate that, employees were bringing forward, I think it's very serious. And I think that, all of the work that had been done, we had been, for many years, a woman-led council who took not only these matters very seriously, but as Diane said, implemented policies to not only prevent this in the city, but organizations within the city. And so, I think the speaker speaks to a larger problem of leadership in the city of Surrey right now. And, unfortunately, the words harassment, sexual harassment are not words that this current mayor is, not accustomed
Alerted
to hearing
by.
attached
Yeah.
to his name. And
Yeah.
I think it's a very serious problem.
It's really quite something in opening that public document, and really the first paragraph outlines the fact that there is literally no infrastructure for reporting complaints of harassment, sexual harassment, or racism. The racism complaints within that document are bone chilling. It's unbelievable, from the Me Too piece to the racism, not even passive, what do they call it? Passive racism that you're not even really aware you're doing. This is overt. The what is being recounted by people here. And as you mentioned, Diane, that was reported, brought to council. We had Brenda Locke on earlier this week to talk this through, and because she said, I want to go on record like this. We got a letter from a male former employee who couldn't take it anymore. He alleged all of what was in that human rights complaint, wrote it all up January 7th. It's July. Like, where's the mechanism for this to have been investigated from a council position? How is that not happening?
Yeah, and that's, I think Barinder's alluded to that for sure, because what should have happened is that these allegations be taken extremely seriously, and to have a letter written to Mayor and Council puts the onus onto Mayor and Council. And so immediately the Mayor should have engaged our HR people and made sure that there was support for those people that were within the human rights declaration there, or the complaint, and they should have investigated it and brought back a report to council. And if the board wanted to address this, the rodeo board wanted to address it independently, then we as a city can facilitate that absolutely. But unfortunately, it obviously fell on deaf ears with this mayor.
The accountability piece is something that comes with this, because in a bigger picture, I mean, I love the Cloverdale Rodeo. Being a horse person, that was the circle on my calendar every year. Learning about agriculture, being behind the scenes, not just about the Broncos and the calf roping, but about the barrel racers and the keyhole, and watching the behind the scenes of caring for these beautiful beasts. There's so much about the Cloverdale Rodeo that needs to be celebrated, and for the young people, for that preteen like me that aspired to work in one of those barns, we have to find a way to ensure there's safety in the workplace moving forward. So that's one of the reasons, why we wanted to bring that up here. Jody Vance with you on my Twitter at Jody Vance. My DMs are always open. We're with Barinder Rasodi and Diane Watts on our political panel. And I have to tell you, I got a DM during the commercial break there from Carol. And this one is for you, Diane. She says, hey, Jody, please ask Diane to come back as mayor and save our city. She'll win by a landslide. We need her back.
Oh, that's very flattering. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yes. Well, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Both of you have so much experience within municipal politics and having to navigate politics on a provincial level, for sure. Diane, certainly you as a former MP. Let's get into sort of your perspective on the response to the BC wildfires, the heat dome, from a politics perspective. How do you see things being handled at all levels of government, for that matter? Diane, you want to start us off here?
Well, I think I'm really pleased to see the provincial government call a state of emergency. I think that was very necessary, especially given the regional districts, the mayors and the councils, First Nations community, really wanting that measure in place. Because with the wildfires and in remote areas, as we well know, that it moves so quickly by the change of, the wind. And so to have all the tools there at your disposal, I think, is what we need to do. So we've got that in place. And as well, we've got firefighters. I think there's 100 firefighters coming up from Mexico, 20 from Quebec. And so we need additional personnel to fight that as well. So I think that this is a collective effort, most certainly. And we've seen the federal government step in with additional assistance with the military as well. So all of those elements, I think, and I hope, as I watch this and watch, it come closer to populated areas, that we get this under control, because it is very devastating. And, to have a town, where you've lived and raised your children burnt to the ground, you're fleeing your home, you're evacuated, all of those things. I mean, not only the mental health issues and the stresses from COVID, now we've got all of this as well. So we all need to come together and do it in a way that is non-partisan, because, this is our community and these are the people that live in the province of British Columbia.
Yeah, I like that nonpartisan piece. Barinder, how have you watched it all unfold from heat dome to wildfire when we just literally came out of a perpetual state of emergency with COVID?
Well, you raise a good point. We've just came out of a perpetual state of emergency. And I think one of the questions that communities and municipal governments and the First Nations may be asking the provincial government is what took so long? So much respect and gratitude for the firefighters who are, working without time off. But to talk to those communities, the 2 lives lost in Lytton, the pets that passed away, people's property, homes, the disruption and the fear that people are living in now in communities like Osoyoos. The First Nations has done such an amazing job building such amazing resort facilities and really doing economic contribution to the entire province. Now looking at bated breath at, the fire itching so close. One of the questions I hope is asked of provincial government and the federal government is, shouldn't we be more prepared for emergency response, not only because of COVID, but because of the heat dome where so many people lost their lives, and paramedics have been put in positions where I'm sure the post-traumatic stress is going to be with them for the rest of their lives because they weren't able to help the number of people. So I do hope at some point we have some more concrete plans, because I'm sure government knows one thing, and this is all 3 levels of government, that this is an occurrence that's been increasing over the years. We see what's been happening in Australia and California. So somebody would have predicted this, and why weren't we ready, and why didn't we call a state of emergency sooner?
That was very prevalent. That question was certainly at the fore over the last couple of weeks. As Diane, as you mentioned, those who were coming together vocally across party lines in some instances, mayors and First Nations, as well as just city representatives and regional districts. In the TNRD, it was like being shouted from the rooftops there to call the state of emergency, and yet it felt for some that it took extra time to get there. Let's move to one more topic here. I'd like to get to 3 more topics with you. Boy, we got to have you guys back. The U.S. border plan, the news of the reopening for U.S. fully immunized U.S. travelers to come north as of August 9th, and the news yesterday about the U.S. keeping their border heading south for Canadians closed until the 21st of August. Let's start with you, Barinder, on this one.
Well, I'm kind of sounding like I'm so negative on this call today, but again, just a lot of questions. There are many people here in Canada who have either homes and families in the U.S. and, we as Canadians buckle down, and the number of deaths and the number of cases compared to what's happened with our neighbors south of the border really leads me to believe that, we can be trusted to be responsible. So for the U.S. to take this position now, I think is, a bit, for me, just raising my eyebrows. And, I understand what's going on. We're still having to be careful, but we're reading more and more headlines about the number of people in the U.S. who are not prepared to get vaccinated to be responsible and to create herd immunity. And so, honestly, to be candid with the people that I've talked to and what I've read, it's just left me really confused. And I do think, again, going back to good governance and good policy, which at the City of Surrey, Diane, when we were on council, was always front of the agenda, we do need some more regular and consistent policies around these type of things so that we don't have this level of confusion all the time.
Last comment to you on that topic, Diane.
Yeah, and I would fully agree with those comments. There's no reason why that border should not be open both ways, especially when you've got people that are fully vaccinated, that have proof of vaccination. And, just having families down across the line, or, there's things that are going on. There's no reason why that should not be opened. And so I look forward to hearing the rationale as to why that's not occurring. And so hopefully by August the 21st, they will have reviewed this and put forward, some initiative to at least let fully vaccinated people cross the border.
Thank you both. I do find it really incredible that you can hop on a plane at YVR and land in Bellingham, but you can't cross at Peace Arch. It's just, it seems just a little...
no sense.
It doesn't really. And I think you both bring some very good points to the table, as always. And that's why when asked who should come on our political panel, I said, how about Bernard Rasodi and Diane Watts? Because it's always a great conversation with the two of you. Thank you for being so candid and honest.
No, my pleasure.
Jody, and good to talk to you, Diane.
Good to chat. Yeah, absolutely.
Jody Vance with you. And, each day this week, we've held this space at this time to talk through vaccine hesitancy. While our vaccination rates here in British Columbia are exceptional, we do not want to see things stall the way we've seen them stall, almost come to a standstill in the United States. There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation that leads to the hesitancy piece. So we want to move the conversation forward from the pro or anti, like the versus, us versus you, I'm right, I'm wrong. Watching what's happening in parts of the U.S. gives us the example of what happens when things get politicized or people start getting into camps. So we want to keep science at the fore here. On Tuesday, Dr. Brian Conway was with us and the phones were so packed, we could not even wean it down to just a few. It was just jammed the entire time. So today we are opening up the phones right off the top here. If you have a question for the medical director and infectious diseases specialist at Vancouver Infectious Diseases Center, Dr. Brian Conway, now's your opportunity. 604-280-9898, star 9898 is a free call on your cell. Every question is a good question. There's no such thing as a dumb question. No one's going to be judged by asking any question as long as it moves the conversation forward with science at the center. So 604-280-9898, star 9898 is a free call on your cell phone. And Dr. Brian Conway, I told you on Tuesday when you said any time, I said you're going to live to regret that.
I am here and I am waiting. We're allowed to disagree with each other. It's when we stop talking to each other that we have a problem. So let's talk.
Yes. So let's have this conversation. I want to start with something just while Leo's getting people lined up. And boy, you're definitely loading up the phone boards as per usual. While Leo manages that, our technical producer, let's talk a little bit about the tweet. Your great follow on social media, on Twitter. And you tweeted this morning about the evidence that we need that is showing that we need at least 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. Can you unpack that a little bit for somebody who maybe has had dose 1 and thinks they're good?
Yeah, well, so the science is evolving and we try to listen to the science. Some excellent information came from the United Kingdom, was published today and showed that if we consider the variant, if you only got 1 shot, the protection rate is only 30%. So it goes up very high, perhaps 85% or better with 2 shots. But 1 shot in this day and age with the rise of the variants is just not good enough. So congratulations on getting your first shot. Line up your second shot as quickly as you can and be part of the solution.
All right, let's get to the phones. We start with Michael in Ladner. Welcome to the program. What's your question for Dr. Conway?
Well, thanks for taking my call. I'm one of the 40,000 people a year in Canada that get cardiac bypass or other heart procedures. And as a result of that, I've had 3 or 4 of my team doctors tell me not to get the vaccine and give me written exemptions for it. I haven't heard this addressed yet. Why people like myself have to lose our rights because we can't take it, and I'm not talking about won't because that's another story, but the risk of blood clots is killing airline pilots everywhere, and there's well-documented evidence that there's a certain amount of people, and it is not rare, like the health authorities claim, that are getting blood clot problems. And so my doctors have given me written exemptions for that here in British Columbia. So how do you respond to that, doctor?
So I'll start with a message of hope. You may well be able to get a vaccine soon. There are 2 issues. One was the blood clots that were associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and that is significantly problematic for an individual like you who has had blood clots in their heart. So we wouldn't ever allow you to get that. There's some association of heart inflammation or myocarditis that's associated with the RNA vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna. So that's put a little bit of a hold on using it in people like yourself. In the next days to weeks, I expect that information will come to light where people like you did get the vaccine. And if we're able to show that there is no increased risk of this heart inflammation in people who have pre-existing conditions like yourself, the ban would be lifted and you would be eligible to get a vaccine.
Hopefully that helps Michael and Ladner. 604-280-9898 or star 9898 is a free call on your cell if you have a question for Dr. Brian Conway, who, by the way, is the medical director and infectious diseases specialist at Vancouver Infectious Disease Center. 604-280-9898, star 9898 on your cell phone. Susan in Surrey, welcome to the show. What's your question for Dr. Conway?
My question is, I've had 2 shots of AstraZeneca. Am I going to be banned from going down to the States when the border is open because I have 2 of those shots?
Well, the issue that you raise has to do with AstraZeneca not being an approved vaccine in the United States. Early on, there was concern that you wouldn't be allowed into the United States. At least for that country, they have said that anyone who's been vaccinated by using a product that's approved by the World Health Organization is going to be fine. So you should be great. In the Europe, they're still studying things, especially the mix and match type of protocols that they haven't used so much. But we're very hopeful that any protocol that makes scientific sense, as long as someone can prove that they're fully vaccinated, will be fine to go to Europe. Double AstraZeneca, you're allowed into the United States.
So it's the World Health Organization approval piece. It's not whether or not the U.S. government has said we're using AstraZeneca or we're putting it on the shelf.
Right. If you recall, a few weeks ago, there was, I think, a Bruce Springsteen concert or the like,
yes,
where the organizers of the concert made up their minds that if it was AstraZeneca, you would not be allowed in. That wouldn't count as being vaccinated. Within 24 hours, they changed their minds. And that's where this idea that if you received a product that is licensed by the World Health Organization, you are fine. Many countries are producing vaccines. In fact, there's one that was produced in Kazakhstan, and it's being used in that country. Not approved by the World Health Organization, that one wouldn't count. I think that's why we have the kind of rules that are in place right now that are going to make sure that people are vaccinated with products that we know work.
All right, 604-280-9898, star 9898. Call in for Dr. Brian Conway. Any question is a good question. If you're feeling hesitant about vaccinations, now is your opportunity to put it on the table. No judgment, just science. Tony in Vancouver, welcome to the show. Oh, thanks, Tony in Vancouver.
Conway,
there you are.
For coming on the show all the time and sharing. It's I find it really helpful. Quick question for you. I have my second dose for Pfizer booked on Monday, and I'm 28, and one of my good friends just got diagnosed with myocarditis after getting his second shot. Can you speak to the prevalence of that, and how bad is it if I actually get it?
It's very rare. Great question. Science is evolving. It's very rare. It's 1 in 100,000 or less. To date, to my knowledge, though I would stand to be corrected, there have been no deaths associated with this side effect and no predictors per se, although I would say that you fall in a very low risk category. And it is far better to get vaccinated than to risk getting COVID because the risk of heart and lung inflammation from getting COVID is far higher than that.
That is a very good point. Jody Vance with you on this Thursday afternoon alongside Dr. Brian Conway. I'm going to have to call you my co-host here filling in on CKNW these days, Doctor, because, people want to ask you the questions. You do come at this from such an inclusive way. I have to commend you for that. And also to our listener who very patiently lines up to ask you any question, because there is no dumb question. There's no bad question. There's no wrong question, especially when it comes to things like vaccines for COVID-19. These make people nervous, some people nervous. So let's get back to the phone line. 604-280-9898, star 9898 is a free call on your cell phone. If you have a question for Dr. Brian Conway, particularly if you're feeling hesitant, bring that question to the table. Let's have this conversation. Tom in Port Coquitlam, you are up next. Tom, what's your question for Dr. Conway?
Hi, Dr. Conway. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I just wanted to talk about that gal that called in the other day. She was talking about just the distrust of the rollout and certain concerns. I thought she made some good points. And
Shelley,
Shelley, I was kind of in a lot of agreement with her. And the question I have is, these people that do have concerns and questions, like some doctors who are getting actually fired and canceled for talking about, should we get our 12-year-old children vaccinated? There's a lot of blowback by these people who are asking questions. But for the people who maybe aren't on side with the vaccines, why don't we prescribe ivermectin, a drug that possibly can help people even that get COVID with the vaccination?
So ivermectin has been studied in a number of clinical trials worldwide, along with other treatments that we thought might work, like hydroxychloroquine. And unfortunately, the studies did not show that it reduces the symptoms in any systematic way, and that it is not ready to be used on a widespread scale. That being said, there are studies ongoing to try and identify if it will help in certain kinds of people in certain situations. And I think as soon as those studies are finished and the results are available, we might consider it. That being said, there's a half a dozen really good drugs that work against COVID directly that are in clinical trials in Canada and at our very center that we think are going to probably be more helpful. And that's really the way in which we're thinking of going. People that are at higher risk have mild symptoms, and we get them early on in the first few days, give them those medicines. Ivermectin was a good idea early on. It doesn't seem to have panned out, at least as of yet.
Keeping the science at the forefront and taking all of those opportunities to figure out what will and will not work. I remember living in Ontario, in Toronto during SARS, and when everybody started talking about Tamiflu and how things, pivoted and changed. And maybe we will find a way, to treat this as we're no longer in the emergency phase. That's just, from a layperson's perspective, I really do appreciate Tom bringing that forward and you coming at it with such science as you do,
Absolutely.
Doctor. Let's continue. We do. And let's continue down the phone board. Stephen Burnaby, you are up next. Steve, what's your question for the doctor?
Hi. So I got my first shot of AstraZeneca over 8 weeks ago, and I've been hesitant about getting the second shot just because of the restrictions going to other countries. We want to go to the U.S., we want to go to Europe, that type of thing. Now, my wife had just seen something on the news of saying if you get AstraZeneca and then another one, it's not necessarily combining too well. So really, I want to be able to travel. What should I do, in your opinion?
I think you should run, not walk, and get the second vaccine that's available to you. Be part of the solution here in Canada, because only one shot, be it the AstraZeneca, be it Pfizer, be it Moderna, does not protect against the variant, which is the majority of the infections that we will be seeing going forward. In terms of travel restrictions, it is a science that is evolving. I and pretty well everyone else who is knowledgeable, let's say, in this field, is confident. We're all confident that countries are going to come to realize that any combination of agents, of vaccines that were licensed by the World Health Organization and are proven to be effective, the mix and match will count as being vaccinated and will allow travel when the time comes early in the fall.
Thank you for your question, Steve. Let's go to Vince in Pitt Meadows. Vince, what's your question for Dr. Conway?
Yeah, I was going to speak about the ivermectin, but that was already answered. I'm a highly educated individual. I have chosen not to get vaccinated. I don't plan on getting vaccinated. If I do, I'll probably wait a year or two to see if there's any adverse side effects. My question to you is, why do you think that with social media and doctors being quelled and silenced on the severe side effects that people aren't being able to learn about? And there are several out there, from the quivering to the blood clotting and all that. Why is that being silenced, and the massive push to just run and get an injection where you could have a chance of getting Bell's palsy or any other severe side effect? What's your answer to that?
Well, Bell's palsy is a really good example. And first in the Pfizer studies, they were saying that there was an association of Bell's palsy with receiving the Pfizer vaccine. But when they did the detailed analysis, they were able to show quite clearly that the frequency of Bell's palsy occurring was equal in those that had received placebo compared to receiving the vaccine. So I think that this is one field where the science in terms of side effects has been applied to a fault better than I've seen in pretty much any other program I've had the privilege of participating in since I've been working in the field of infectious diseases. So I think as soon as any side effect is reported, it is analyzed in great detail. It is never, ever put aside. It is never neglected. And the first thing that people do is to figure out if it happened or not. And if it did, is there any association with the vaccine in terms of it being caused by the vaccine? Just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean that one caused each other. And the best tool we have is the frequency of side effects occurring in the general population. And if people say, I got this when I got the vaccine, you say, well, that happens a lot in the general population. There's no convincing evidence that it's associated with the vaccine, and that's how we move forward. I think people get concerned that they're so convinced that this is a side effect of the vaccine, but when it's confronted to scientific analysis and it doesn't pan out, they hold to that original belief, and I think that's the kind of issue we need to continue discussing. Anyone who reports any side effect should be listened to. We should analyze it, but when we have figured out that it isn't associated with the vaccine, we need to move on.
Science will tell the truth. It is not swayed by opinion. It is science. It's like magic, only real. That's my favorite T-shirt. Dr. Brian Conway, thank you so much for doing this. As always, we appreciate you. Looking forward to our next time.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me again.
Jody Vance with you, and I asked this question: who's in the house?
Eric Chapman is in the house.
Thank you.
And my segment's done.
Eric
Thank
Hour.
you for tuning in to CKNW. We appreciate your listening. Okay. So we're talking about this digital citizenship, how to deal with grumpy tweets, and this one freaks me out. The dislike button. What are your thoughts on this dislike button, Joe? Do you like it?
No good can come of the dislike button. I think social media has enough negativity on it that we don't need that. I also don't like that the like button became a little heart. That overstates it for me. It's like, what? You either you just acknowledge it or you retweet it. It's, retweets are not endorsements, but I'm just showing people what I'm seeing. I think it should be more simplistic.
I don't even understand the like in the first place. Cause even when people, maybe we need to change the term, because if someone posts a death in the family and you like that, it's like, that's like weird. That, I don't understand it. It's very. But
you don't want to dislike that either.
Well, that's it, right? I just feel like, maybe like's not the word we should be using. Maybe partially agree or moderately agree button.
Aligned with.
There you go. Okay, when I think of the dislike button, this is my reaction.
You come out with stink like that, poop mouth, poop out of your mouth.
That is how I feel, honestly.
Wow. That's a thing. Visceral.
Professor, yes, very much so. Very much so. Felt deep inside. Professor Jesse Miller of Mediated Reality, the dislike button. I had a chat with him about it because, again, ew. And what level of Dante's Inferno are we opening with this button? What are your thoughts, Jesse?
Okay, so a couple of years ago, I was doing these sessions talking to parents about how their kids live in this affirmation culture, right? And they were all very angry about all these kids and mental health is all about getting likes, yada, yada, yada. And I said, what if we introduced the dislike button? What would your own personal social media look like if you posted a picture of your family and 30% of the people who follow you are no, dislike. Would you still use the platform? And so affirmation culture really has structured the way we use social media. But what it's done over 15 years is it's caused this rift where we see these things happening where people all of a sudden say, well, the algorithm knows things about me and everybody's doing these things and they're only doing it for the popularity contest. But the reality of it is that our culture, our marketing, our commerce is all based on likes and dislikes. And you don't have to like anything that somebody else does and vice versa. So when we think about the way that individuals use these platforms, Reddit, a huge social media website where there's communities of actual people affirming posts and putting content in that shows why the post is total garbage, that's existed for a very long time. And it's like a dislike button. It's just up votes and down votes. Now, Facebook has been doing this with their comment section. And it's like, if the comment is helpful, upvote it so that it kind of finds its way in the feed of the community better. And if it's not that great, push it down so it kind of sits down where it's supposed to be, in the garbage heap of the internet cesspool.
You mentioned affirmation culture there, which I've never heard of. So this is all just kind of part of that. And like any other culture, it has its ups and downs.
Oh, exactly. And the thing is, we've created a social media environment where we do like things, we amplify them. And that's where the social media influencer kind of comes into play. But the reality of it is that we also factor that in where we kind of call it cancel culture. And in that, when somebody does something that the majority of the community says, no, this is inappropriate, we cancel them as opposed to pushing the content down. So the biggest thing now becomes, where does this new dislike feature play? I much rather say I dislike what you're saying as opposed to disliking the individual. But the reality of it is that it's a hard thing to discern, because I could say there are people out there who I really don't value their opinion, but we might be aligned in the same way when it comes to something that we would say culturally is okay, or society, we need to do that. So within that, it's almost like the politics of our lives. There are politicians out there that I have no affinity towards in any way, shape, or form, but I don't mind their platform if their platform is for the greater good.
Right. Okay, say someone dislikes all of your tweets like a troll, and they keep chirping you, and you finally clap back, and it unleashes the worst moment since Green Lantern's release. Like, you know you don't want to do this, but you do it. How do you recover from that?
Well, the reality of it is that it becomes quite difficult for individuals to navigate how people respond to them on social media. So when you start to feel that pile on, all those individuals kind of coming at you, that's where mental health plays a big role. Not everybody is in a position to deal with people actively disliking them. And the thing is that when we think about our kind of our people in our everyday general society who are disliked, they let it kind of roll off their back because they turn around and say, you know what, this doesn't affect me because I'm still making millions of dollars. I have an audience who does like me. And the reality of it is that not everybody is prepared to be on social media. It is just a very toxic and caustic environment that sometimes isn't the healthiest of places. So when we sit there and say some people aren't wired for politics, they're better off in private business, that's another reality, right? Some people might not be ready for the everyday discourse of anybody liking them or not liking them. It comes down to, how do we create safer environments for healthy communication in our very kind of remote communities of social media? Not like for the grand scheme of all the world to hear, but if in your community you're trying to make some change, where can it become a better positive experience by engaging in a healthy way? Or maybe, sometimes when you say something, not everybody likes it, but they don't need to pile on and destroy you as a human being.
Oh, we kind of think, that community. Oh, man, Jesse, you're sparking. Like, we got to think of it as our own communities within the internet community. That would probably be helpful when even dealing with this stuff, because we think it's everybody, but it's really not. It's just your community.
Sure. And the thing is that there are people in this world who would say one individual was the most toxic person that they've ever met. Another person might sit there and say, that person, without them in my life, I would not be able to get by my everyday. Right. So here's the thing about our social media communities. It is a society. And now we've kind of taken the borders and the structures and the geography away from that society, and anybody can be negative. Anybody can target you. The problem there becomes, how do we start to police that when it becomes bombarded hate, when it becomes really trying to just, take a human being down to these little parts of who they are and make them just irrelevant. So the hard part here is, yes, in cancel culture pieces, let's kind of pivot that to accountability culture. And at the same time, when we think about our society on social media, if we can create spaces that are healthier for our everyday discourse, maybe a dislike button does help.
Interesting. Okay, now put your doctor hat on now really quick, Jesse. How do you refrain from sending the grumpy tweet in the first place?
Well, I'm not a doctor in any way, shape, or form. It takes a lot of energy to get to that level, and I don't have it these days. But the reality of it is that with the grumpy tweet, we have to consider how individuals feel about just our everyday discourse. And so sometimes there is the pushback. We sit there and weigh it out and say, this isn't worth my time. But the reality of it is, like, even right now, like, I'm on a bit of a sabbatical hiatus from my everyday work. I'm kind of feeling the stress of COVID in the sense of, getting back to quote unquote normal for my own mental health. But the reality of it is that I'm finding a balance where when I see somebody post something on social media where they act entitled, where they think they know all the facts, where they don't even equate for any of the history that got us to where we are today, maybe a little bit of education is needed. So for me, my grumpy kind of social media pushback lately has been, let me hold you accountable to your opinion, because your opinion isn't based in fact. And that right there becomes something where we do have good discourse when people see that and they say, this is an educated opinion coming from this space, as opposed to do your own research and maybe you just Googled that. I think the hard part here is that we do have an attack on expertise, and if somebody has done the work and somebody has done the research, it's the same thing with doctors, right? Like I believe when I go to a medical professional, they're going to give me good advice because they were going to graduate through a program. Doesn't mean that every doctor is going to give me the best advice. It doesn't mean every doctor is correct. But when we see, the majority of doctors say things like, oh, guess what? COVID is real. Oh, guess what? Here are the issues and here's the ways of mitigating it. 99.9% of doctors are saying that. But the 0.01 who are saying something opposite maybe are looking to position themselves in a way that gets them a different audience. And so in that, the grumpy pushback is, hey, listen, if I saw that 55 or 60% of doctors were saying this top provincial doctor is wrong, maybe I'd be listening differently. I'm not seeing that. So the grumpy tweet, the grumpy pushback is part of what our society needs to hold people to that point where we're saying, we're not letting your misinformation, we're not letting your garbage take the wheel.
Oh, so should we apologize for our grumpy tweets then?
You know what? I think I apologize when I feel like I've actually kind of pushed somebody into a corner in a negative way, but that's just the way I've made up. Like if I use my wit to hold somebody accountable, and later on I'm like, oh, maybe I kind of knocked them around when they weren't in the mental logistics category as I am. It'd be the same as the person who weighs 275 all muscle beating up a person who's $150 and not. Maybe they say I could have controlled that situation better. The reality of it is that I do feel guilty sometimes when I hold somebody accountable on social media. But the reality of it is, if it's for the greater community good, no, I'm not going to apologize too loudly for it.
Jody Vance with you alongside Eric Chapman. Is Eric Chapman in the house? Yeah, there you are.
I'm here. Oh, I thought I was going to play my ID.
Eric Chapman is in the house.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you.
Jeez, keep up.
You. Please. I know we've only got a couple of minutes here, and I did tease on the other side where I had like a throwdown Twitter exchange with somebody who actually used to work at the Vancouver Province and Sun. Chris Perry is his name. He's a great investigative journalist. And we were going back and forth. This is years ago now. We were going back and forth on Twitter. Boom, boom, boom. Grumpy tweet. And then we kind of met in the middle. We're like, hey, you know what? We probably get along. And now, as you know, Eric, I'm a freelancer.
Wait,
I fill in here on CK.
Yeah.
Chris Perry. Well, he hired me. One of my contracts is with Chris Perry at Equity Dog Guru. Like I do First Glance with Jody Vance. With Chris Perry, like you never know when the acrimonious back and forth, if you find a little bit of middle ground, you might actually find you have a lot in common with the people that you find are a little bit sandpapery, strong personalities. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, you should do a column on called The Middle. It just it keeps the conversation going. It's like it's okay to kind of Jesse's point. Like there's room for a little pushback. But just there's a line, and as long as we don't cross that line, I used to be in hip hop. I used to battle rap. Like we made fun of each other's mother 2 inches from each other's face. So that's kind of my world. But there is always a line, and as long as we're conscientious of that, I think there's room for a little discourse.
In my mind, and I know the CKNW listeners with me on this, is imagining you battle rapping. I'm going to 8 Mile right now. You are like not even full close. On mom spaghetti.
No, please no. Okay, get a break. It's time to break.
I'm Jody Vance in for CKNW Afternoons on your Thursday alongside Eric Chapman. Hopefully you're still connected. I had one of those work from home moments here. Eric, are you there?
I am here. I was tripping out there for a second.
Great.
You got me? Okay, good.
I got you. Look at this. This is legit what doing radio work from home is like. You're like, am I not connected? Is he not connected? We're used to seeing each other. We're used to sitting across from each other. I mean, it's been a year and a half now. It's really odd. Anyways, good to hear your voice, my friend. And let's talk through this next topic because it is very COVID related. COVID related and also music icon related. And I got to tell you, as a longtime Eric Clapton fan, I've learned a lot recently about things I should have known long before and where we're at right now with regard to Clapton's position on science.
Well, and this has gone back, Jody, if you remember, to 6 months ago, I want to say at least, When he did a song with Van Morrison, he co-wrote and produced a song that was anti-lockdown, anti-vaccination, all of that stuff. So you're right. This is some stripes of Eric Clapton that we are seeing that are new. And depending on how you feel, you have a certain reaction to it. But you cannot argue. Yeah, you do?
Yeah.
You don't like it?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't like it.
It
does. It taints his music for me. Yeah, go. No,
really? You won't go back?
I don't know.
Okay. See, this is similar to the Michael Jackson. Like, this has happened for a lot of people, for different circumstances, of course, much different. But I find it interesting. And as I was saying, what he is doing, if you're really thinking about it, it is rock and roll at the definition, standing up against and fighting for what you believe in. So whether you agree with him or not, it kind of is rock and roll and hardcore. But the polar opposites when it comes to Bruce Springsteen and Eric Clapton, one requiring vaccine passports at concerts, that's Springsteen. Not doing a gig with vaccine passports, that's Clapton. Eric Alper is a musicologist and publicist. He chatted to me about this, but I started by congratulating Eric Alper on his most recent Billboard article.
Thanks, man. That was a lot of fun. You know, it's nice to be recognized. And look, I had a subscription to Billboard when I was 12. Oh. So this was kind of, it was kind of neat seeing that article in the magazine that I've long loved and helped support.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I had my name in the Source magazine, or my group's name in the Source magazine, and same thing. It was just my name, but I still have it framed. I'm like, that's so dope.
That's all you need sometimes, right? And I think anybody in any business has that. If you get recognized just a little bit by your peers, you're kind of like, well, that certainly made all those bad days worth it.
And bad days add up. Well, it couldn't happen to a better guy, so congrats again.
Thanks, man.
You bet. So here we go. The vaccination passports at concert. The one, Eric Clapton and Springsteen. Springsteen only allowing people with vaccinated passports. Clapton saying, nope, I don't want those passports. First of all, what are your thoughts on the passports, vaccine passports for concerts?
I'd love to see now Clapton and Springsteen tour together and just ballot out. Just have them fighting on stage and then have the audience just ballot out like a WWE competition. This is really interesting because it's certainly the political side of this planet is getting into the music industry. But it always has, though. Liking a band, loving a band, supporting a band has always almost been political when you really get down to it. But what's interesting about the Clapton situation is that he didn't really have to say anything publicly. He could have just chosen to announce his tour in America in places where they're not requiring a vaccine passport or proof that you've been vaccinated. There's certainly a lot of places in America that he could have gone to, and nobody even would have been the wiser about that. But because since the pandemic hit, he's been very vocal about thinking that the COVID has been fake. It's been that the vaccines have been unproven, and he's certainly entitled to have that opinion if he wants to. The general public, of course, has the absolute right to say, I'm not going to go see you anymore because A, I don't agree with you, or B, I just don't feel safe knowing that the options now are completely vaccinated concerts. And I think that's where we're heading into, because no insurance company, no liability company wants to actually handle perhaps somebody getting sick and maybe even dying at a show.
Yeah. And ticket sales, I think either way, Springsteen or Clapton, this won't affect either one. In fact, I bet you it bumps sales for both of them.
Oh, absolutely. One of the interesting questions is that will those red states in America, or people that don't believe in vaccines, and I'm not saying that, obviously if you are a Clapton fan, you don't believe in a vaccine, but I have a feeling that people who did get a vaccine aren't going to be feeling so safe around knowing that maybe half the crowd hasn't gotten vaccinated. That's the reason why they got vaccinated in the first place, and so that they can minimize the risk. It's going to be interesting to see if Eric Clapton's crowd will make up perhaps the difference of those people who won't go see him, and look, the proof is that, people that have been vaccinated have been maybe a little bit more highly educated. They certainly may make a little bit more money than people who aren't getting vaccinated. At least that's what we're seeing in the US. Can those people who live in a red state afford $500 tickets for Eric Clapton? I guess we're going to soon find out.
Yeah, right. And I think going back to the artist too, I think you've mentioned this before when we've chatted about Clapton previously with the Van Morrison song. Either side, whether you want the vaccine passports or not, you're taking a stance, and at the heart of it all, like, this is rock and roll, standing up against whatever you want to stand up against.
Yeah, and I think that's why you have to admire Eric Clapton and people like Van Morrison for at least taking a side and saying, you know what, I need to continue to question authority. I need to look at what I'm looking at and make a decision. I think where the problem is lying is that the majority of the people that are the loudest in terms of the media structure are mostly on the side of get the shot. And I think that's where all of the snarkiness comes in, the negativity comes in. The people that have the most power seem to all be on the side of getting vaccinated. So, but look, you go to certain parts of the world and there are going to be a lot of people who agree with Eric Clapton, and they've got their own opinions as well. And I think it just makes for real interesting conversation down the road and right now, actually. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm never for, I go back to this all the time. There's a Flat Earthers documentary on YouTube where there's a bunch of physicists, they gather for a salon once a month or something like that to talk about educated topics. And one of the physicists gets up there after someone puts down Flat Earthers, and he's like, look, these are smart minds. These are brilliant people that have ideas that we can't just shun them. We have to have these conversations like you mentioned. So as and I even catch it, as you said, like the people that are for vaccinations, I even catch myself sometimes being snobby about getting vaccinated. So I think that's a good check to run on ourselves. I wonder too, in the past, it's fascinating thinking about, how music is reflected in politics and world events. Has there ever been an instance where an artist and another artist have been kind of like diametrically opposed like this on something? I don't think so. And there's a lot of them, certainly. There's Eric Clapton and Kid Rock and MIA in the rap world. And there's a number of rap artists as well that have been against vaccinations from the very, very beginning. And it's certainly a polarizing issue. I can't remember, I think, another time when this had happened, maybe during the Gulf War, but well after the Dixie Chicks were essentially, canceled before the word even came into being in a regular basis, when all these people started coming out years after the Iraq war saying, well, maybe we should have, gone against, the Republicans, and maybe we should have been outspoken and take our chances with radio not playing us and video stations not playing us. I think that was I think that was the last test of before we entered into the new world of, if you don't agree with me and I have power to cancel you, I will do so. Radio stations are still playing Eric Clapton. Radio stations are still playing Michael Jackson, despite, his rumors. So I think it's really good that Eric Clapton gets to have a say in it. And, we'll have to just wait and see if it actually harms his career down the road.
The coolest part of that conversation is just realizing that music is part of every aspect of our lives. It's relatable in every way, which I think is really magical. I do too. But I'm going to reiterate what I said off the top, as the daughter of a scientist, you can push back on a lot. You can push back on positions on things. But when we're talking about a global pandemic and you're not getting vaccinated, could literally kill, my niece who can't get vaccinated. It's like, okay. At one point, it's that level of science that comes into play. I love Eric's position on how rock and roll has always been rock and roll. And my punctuation here, as I was listening to him talk about Kid Rock and da-da-da, and I'm thinking, you know what? I totally get that. I just realized I'm Team Dolly Parton. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yes, Dolly. Let's go. I'm not a snob. I just believe that, let's use our platforms and our way to make the world a better place. And it does. It changes how I think about
Eric Clapton, and I used to love him so much. So I'm disappointed.
It's a shame. It's a shame.
Give me some Springsteen. Did I mention that our technical director, Leo Coelho, has seen Bruce Springsteen 24 times? 24 times.
Yeah. Can I ask some questions to Leo right now about that, Jody? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Leo, are you there?
Turn on your mic.
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. How much money have you spent traveling around following Bruce Springsteen?
Don't ask me that because I've lost track. But I've retired from that life. I don't travel for concerts anymore. Well, now with COVID, that's the first maturity. I've done what I followed him for a tour. So his last in 2016. So yeah,
a whole tour.
I mean, I tried, but I couldn't take time off, so it was like in between. I was in grad school at the time, so which I had yeah. So
come on, get your act together, Leo. Follow him around the whole tour. Oh, okay, I have a couple questions here. In the picture that's pinned to your Twitter, you're wearing a Boss sweater. Was that strategical because you're standing by the boss?
Oh, yeah, so you noticed that?
No,
I was trying to, I only had hand-me-downs and I wanted to wear something nicer, so I thought of a few brands. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. So that made sense.
Okay, and one last question. What did the Boss smell like? Leather and guitar strings?
Oh God, I want to cook. Maybe just
creepy
leather.
question.
Yeah,
I'd
say just
sweat?
just like leather.
Wait a sec. I ask what he smells like, and Leo follows him around the world, and I'm the creepy one here. Come on, guys, what's going on?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well.
What the furthest you said? The furthest you said you went to a concert
it was
New Zealand, right?
New Zealand. Two concerts at Christchurch and Auckland. Yeah,
that's really cool.
That's commitment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leo Coelho. I love that. These are the things we learn in commercial breaks here on the program. De nada. Let's get to Carly D. Set this up, Eric.
So earlier we're getting our daily fire report, which you will hear at 3:45 tomorrow from Fire Officer Carly D. And she was giving the skinny on what's going on. And near the end, she said something that just kind of... It rubbed me and probably everyone listening the wrong way. So here's what Carly D said.
Something that has come up since we last chatted is, unfortunately, we have had some members of the public who have come across our off-shift firefighters or personnel support and just kind of made comments that they aren't working hard enough or should get back to the fire line. And just want to acknowledge we understand that things are incredibly distressing and difficult for members of the public. But of course, those people are out long days working really hard to try to keep everyone safe. And we do just want to remind everyone that they deserve our respect and gratitude from those folks.
Yeah, we're going to give them nothing but love in a minute, but I just want to give this response to that comment. Whoever said that to the firefighters.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
And shout out and mad love to anybody out there risking your life to save people's property and lives. Like mad love to every firefighter fighting a fire right now, or has fought a fire, or will fight a fire in the future.
Right. The off-shift people battling the wildfires in BC deserve your highest admiration and gratitude, and certainly receive that from us here at CKNW. To the people directing traffic, to the people who are sweeping up in areas that are no longer hotspots and doing the work that will make sure that this province recovers from this state of emergency we find ourselves in right now. Stay off the lake if you see the skimmers coming in. Back up. Put your drone away. These are the things that we've got to do to help bolster the people working so hard on our wildfires on the front lines. I want to say thank you. Speaking of hardworking people, Eric, John Straight doing news, Leo, of course, Coelho, our technical producer, Ryan Leehall, who has been our lead producer today, Trish Jewison, taking care of traffic, Christy Gordon, keeping our forecast in our sites. Of course, you, Eric Chapman, thank you. I will connect with you next week again as I fill in here on CKNW Afternoons in the early parts of the week. And up next, stay tuned because your Global News Hour at 6 is after a quick break here on 980 CKNW.
Thank you for listening to the Linda Steele Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe for free at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you get your on-demand audio. And join the conversation. You can reach me on Twitter at Steele Talk, on Facebook, and by email, linda@cknw.com. Talk to you next time.